So a little birdie tells me you've got big news.
I got big news today, Stephen. There's been a whole lot of stuff going on. A lot of the alt media and the people in the network that we're in are very hot on trying to figure out what they think is the unravelling of what may be a paedophile ring. It may be misappropriation of funds, but it definitely is a shutdown of free speech and balanced media, at its very least.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't surprise me, given that we talk about this stuff quite a bit, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of information coming out that lots of independent reporters are doing, and I've been sitting on a little trail of money and concern for a little while, and I'm really excited to be here today. I've been busting to get this out, so let's jump into
bust
it.
no longer.
Bust no longer. I get to go and do it. So
Good.
what we're going to look through is we're going to go back to about 2019 when Jacinda Ardern was in charge. It's always quite hard to go back and watch stuff with her in it, to be honest.
Oh, no, come on. Wasn't she our favourite Prime Minister?
Well, for some she still is, which is quite concerning. But anyway, we're going to go and have a look at some things right from back there and how I've found what it definitely is a money trail between something that she did back in 2019 with Grant Robertson and how it's impacted on our children's lives today.
And if I understand, because I've seen a little bit of this, it starts out looking like a really good thing.
It starts out looking like a good thing, and I think that's probably how that's happened with a lot of situations that we find ourselves in today, is that potentially they have taken a situation that was intended for good and they've pushed the boat out too far, and they've probably added a whole lot of money and a whole lot of agenda to it, and now we're left with a mess and we don't quite know how we got here and what to do about it. And the other thing too is that I've been talking to MPs and people like that over the last couple of weeks regarding the evidence that I have. I can only speak for myself, and sort of go, well, when you know that you know that you know what you're looking at, what can we do about it?
Tell us, Pen. What can we do about it?
I was told that what we can do about it is try and get them to put a bill through and hope that that comes up, and then over time hope that that pops up and that the people in Parliament will vote for it.
There might be a better way.
You tell me.
We just tell everyone what's going on, and then public awareness says, what the hell are you doing? A little bit like the Benjamin Doyle thing.
Yeah, well, I kind of want to take it one step further because I don't like doing media just for the sake of being media and saying something and being a bit sensationalist and everybody just angry, right? Because that's not what we want right now. And for people that watch our stuff, I always want to help people to know what to do about it. And actually my shirt,
there it is,
which says "We the People" since ages ago. It's one that I designed, and people can buy them if they want to. But really, it comes down to us. You know, if we're saying, "Hey, media, why don't you fix it? Hey, politicians, why don't you fix it?" We're still giving our power away, and we're hoping that someone else is going to do something about it. And I'm not a person for going out writing and protesting in the streets. I am very much a person for when I talk about this topic around the children. If you've got kids, if you've got grandkids, if you're in a role where you're dealing with kids, you got to wake up. You got to wake up. You got to take responsibility for the well-being of the children. And if that flies in the face of policy, if it flies in the face of doing your job, if it flies in the face of following a process, have another think about it. Think about whether this was going on when you were a kid, and think about whether children are better or worse off these days for what is funded to come in. So that's kind of my bit of a rant to start off. But again, I just speak from the heart of talking to parents all day, every day, and seeing firsthand what's going on, and also having my own personal experience of it. So, I come pretty well qualified to know what I'm looking at here. So that said, shall we jump into it?
Please, jump away.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is Beehive, where in June 2019, where Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson established something called a Rainbow Wellbeing Legacy Fund. So Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, so I'll just read this, improving the mental health and wellbeing of young members of the Rainbow community is at the heart of the establishment of the Rainbow Wellbeing Legacy Fund, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said today. The fund is an acknowledgement of those New Zealanders who were convicted for homosexual acts before the law was changed in 1986. In 2017, the government apologised to them, and in 2018 passed a law to allow for convictions to be expunged. In the wake of this, suggestion was made by some of the men involved that a fitting legacy would be to establish a fund that supports the young people of the Rainbow community. That is exactly what this fund will do, Grant Robertson says. So it was around expunging convictions for historical homosexual offences. So I'm all
Right.
good with that.
Right.
So that was back in the day, back before, when I was little, there were historical cases where if you were homosexual, that was a criminal act. So back in history, they fixed all that.
Right, so all prior criminal acts to do with just being homosexual have rightly and appropriately been dissolved and removed.
Correct.
And it's no longer on your record.
That's
Can't
correct.
be something that'll prevent you from getting a job or
Yeah.
failing a police check.
Yeah. And this clean slate rule, I think, applied from 2004. So we're all good with that. I'm totally cool with that.
Yep. Yeah, me too.
My question becomes, why are they taking that legislation and that was job done?
Mm-hmm.
And why are they now deciding arbitrarily, just themselves and a couple of their mates who say that they're people that were involved in this? So my take on that, if we can go back to the screen, is that the people that came up with the idea to start this fund up for rainbows were potentially the men that had their crimes expunged. So they already got what they wanted, is kind of what I'm saying. They wanted to get their crimes expunged.
So
They
you're
did.
sort of saying you got what you want, why more?
You got what you want. What does this have to do with the rainbow community? Because it was about homosexuality, which are actually two different things. Or they didn't used to be, but they are now, perhaps, is the best way to say it. And what does it have to do with youth?
Yeah, good question.
Okay, so that's kind of where I'm heading here, and this is where it's gone. So there was a criminal records expungement for convictions of historical homosexual offences. So moving on from the legislation that I just showed, there's a departmental disclosure statement, which is a summary of this expungement law. So I'm just going to go down to page 3. So general policy sought to be achieved. So what they wanted to get out of this when it was stated was the Homosexual Law Reform Act 1986 decriminalised sexual conduct between consenting males 16 years and older. So 16 in New Zealand is the legal age for consent. So it was for people that could legally consent to sex. This is about adults. And then if we go back to what the Beehive statement was, they're actually focusing this $1 million endowment fund that they're creating, this thing for youth. And also, as we very well know, they're not doing it for homosexual youth. They're doing it for all the other letters in the alphabet. And actually, there isn't very much there for gay and lesbian young people anymore, or adults in the whole Pride movement. But I would love to hear from people in that space, lesbians and gays, who tell me, and they do speak out about it, but not very much here in New Zealand publicly, that there is nothing for them in this gay rights movement anymore. It's not a gay rights movement. And then in America, you've got the likes of, Gays Against Groomers, so they're a big gay organisation who absolutely know that this industry has been taken over for nefarious means.
So it looks like it's set up for what we have today, what it's become today, because it's moved away from the good thing that it was set up to expunge criminal convictions against something that maybe should never have been a criminal conviction, to now have it so that you can pull society in this direction.
Yeah, so that you can fund something. So if you go back to our USAID videos, and I bang on quite a lot about the Mike Benz interview with Joe Rogan, where he talks about that they micro-target and fund like aggressive groups to be activists and lobbyists. And I mean, let's talk honestly here, we know that that's what's happening.
So is this a history lesson in how to create a funding pathway in New Zealand?
It's what I have found as to how this got established well and proper. And I'm not talking about anything that happened funding wise before that, but this is a start point for me that I'm starting at in 2019, where Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson decide to endow $1 million into a fund, which then was used to fund an increasing number of rainbow charities, which are all tax exempt. So this is our taxpayer money and a definite trail of where it came from and what it's doing. So it's going to be an interesting conversation.
And they're tax exempt.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in paragraph 2, in line 3, it says, if a person's application is provided under the scheme, the person's criminal record will be amended to ensure the conviction doesn't appear on a criminal history check for any purpose in New Zealand, and the person will be entitled to declare the person has no conviction. So while that probably sounded okay at the time, I'm actually starting to wonder whether this might have been a precursor to the name change legislation, which we have now, where they've brought in that you can change your gender, which is made up, and you can't actually change your sex because we can't do that because we're biological beings. But when they go through that legal process, they can change their gender marker and they can change their name. And I don't know, this is something I'd like to know more if other people have looked at it, or we can look at it together, but maybe this was a doorway for the later on the name change stuff, which actually these organisations get funded to help people to do. Which, what concerns me about it is that you could have, for example, a man who may have been convicted of criminal offences, either paedophilic offences or to adults, who then decides they're going to be non-binary or a woman and then change their name and have all of those details changed in legal paperwork, and then they kind of their dead name without a trace. Gone burger.
Oh, what an interesting loophole for escaping things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's important to know, we're not arguing the Homosexual Reform Act back in there. We're talking about what happened with what they did with that to move things over in their direction furthermore.
It's a really important distinction because, like, you and I have both, since you've started talking about this, stated our love and appreciation for the importance of what this bill should be for.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't help but notice how things like this are used for something nefarious, because then if you were to say, hey, something bad's going on here that started at this point, people can turn the finger back on you and go, oh, you don't like that law, you a bad man. But in fact, that's just like, get that out of your head, because this is how they use a good thing for a bad purpose.
That's correct. And I mean, we've talked about it before and we'll talk about it again, but they being the trans rights activists, target people who speak out about anything related to their minority stigmatized group as being transphobic, homophobic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So this is why we're very clear that we're not complaining about this law back in 1986.
No, it's a good thing.
So, yeah, we'll just continue on. I'm going to go back and have a look at this Beehive document and just the rest of it. So it says the government is proposing to establish a charitable trust with a one-off endowment of $1 million. Follow the money. The trust will administer the payment of annual grants to support organisations that improve the mental health and wellbeing outcomes in New Zealand rainbow communities, with a particular focus on organisations that support young people. Okay? So it's already shifted now away from the original intention, and then they're dropping money in due to this thing that's happened, and Grant Robertson, who's an openly gay man, and Jacinda Ardern and some of their friends decided this was a great idea. I'm going to make an assumption that the friends that they decided that this was a great idea with perhaps were some of the men that had their convictions expunged. It was like their way of celebrating it. So
Maybe.
I don't know who those were, because they would have thing, but who would have the interest in this? Would probably be my question. Who's got a vested interest in making sure that they're moving some money into this field? So what I sort of say is, so there's a few gay men and perhaps ones who had their crimes exonerated, and they make a suggestion, and lo and behold, Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson throw them a cool $1 million.
Wow. Another gravy train.
Another gravy train. They already had their crimes expunged. So yeah, that's a really interesting one. And it says, this is a community proposed and driven idea that has come from one part of the community for another, and the government is proud to make it happen. It says the government takes mental health seriously, and this fund helps to tackle one of New Zealand's long-term challenges of mental health. Now, they hadn't actually said in the statement that there was a problem with mental health.
Good point. Good point.
They just said, maybe they knew that there was going to be. Who knows?
That sounds like a really helpful sort of buzzword to just throw right on in there. And mental health. So,
yeah,
you know.
I know, right. So, and now we have a Minister for Mental Health, which we didn't have before. So this was, 2019, they threw a whole lot of money at it. And a few years later, we have a new Minister of Mental Health. And we talk about this a little bit, that they potentially created a bit of an industry there. So we'll talk about that in a bit, but I just am going to touch on Matt Ducey again, who I bring up again and again and again on this, because he is the new Minister of Mental Health, the first one I mean, and if that's not alarming enough, we need to look at who he is. So I'm just going to play, now this video is his part of his speech that he did at the second reading of the ban on conversion therapy.
Right.
Okay, so let's just have a listen to what he says.
I also stand here tonight as an individual who's been on both sides of the therapeutic alliance. someone who's been a consumer, and someone who's been a mental health practitioner. As we do say in mental health, it is a fine line between provider and consumer at times. I also stand here as someone who's a proud father of 2 young children, a boy and a girl, and I do look forward to celebrate their sexual orientation, their gender identity that they will decide, and someone who grew up in a faith-based community and still goes to church.
He's really covering all of his bases there, isn't he?
Readings are about submissions, and I want to bring voice to one submission, and that is the Young Nats. The Young Nats have been championing the banning of conversion practices since late 2019, and I want to acknowledge them for all their advocacy.
So that's quite an interesting thing to listen to, is that he's speaking on behalf of the Young Nats who are pushing for this conversion ban, which is the same as what the Greens and the Labour were pushing. So most people voted for that. So I just wanted to have that on the record, that he was talking on behalf of Young Nats, which people would have guessed was a little bit more conservative perhaps. But they are all saying conversion therapy is wrong. Actually, I'm going to just play it for a minute longer.
It is difficult, I think, having different views, especially when those differing views are within your own caucus. But I think it's important that we do debate them. I want to acknowledge Stephanie Ann Ross, the President of the New Zealand Young Nationals, and Madison Chamberlain, the National Policy Chair of the New Zealand Young Nationals. They were very clear in their submission of why they supported the banning of conversion practices, that there was no evidence that conversion practices work.
So their whole premise of voting for this legislation to come in to outlaw conversion practices, and we'll talk about what that is for people that don't understand, is that they reckon, as Young Nats, that there's no evidence that it works. So they weren't even saying that it harms, they just said there's no evidence that it works. So conversion practice, what they interpret it to be, is when you're a young gay person, or a gay person of any age, I suppose, and you go to a counsellor or a pastor, and their wording for it is they want you to pray the gay away. So they want you to say you're straight when you're actually a gay. That's the premise of what they put the conversion therapy ban practices through. And all the people that I have looked at that have been promoting it have their own victim story about how they came across a pastor that wanted to pray their gay away, or they were hassled or bullied for being gay. That's the premise of what they're talking about. The result has been a very hard legislation that's gone in, and there's a background to how it got there. And we talk about it a little bit in the second USAID video, and I'll do another one about it. But there's a global push from the United Nations to install conversion practices legislation. How that is playing out very badly overseas, and it hasn't come to court here that I know of, but it will in time, is that if you, for example, have a boy, and the boy, through accessing stuff online or listening to stuff in school and questioning not only whether they're homosexual, but perhaps that they're born in the wrong body and they should be a girl, which is what's happening a lot at the moment due to the information coming in. As a parent or as a counsellor or as a pastor, you are not allowed to say to that child, no, just wait for a while, you are a boy.
Okay, so they've taken the whole pray the gay away thing, which is quite easy to ridicule and say that's a bad thing, no matter what your feelings might be on that. And I'm all here for your freedom of religious beliefs, but I can see how that's caught negative attention, and how people will think, oh, what a silly thing, you can't pray away your sexual identity, But whatever your beliefs are on that, and I understand, they can ridicule it so that then anything that comes close to looking like it's, oh, someone's trying to convert my child, someone who's important in my community, a priest or whoever, is trying to say, hey, just, slow your your approach to this decision about puberty blockers or whatever else they're going through is going to be considered to be in that box of pray the gay away, which they can demonise, and now they can slam hard on that because there's legislation against it.
Yeah, exactly that. So we're not allowed to question if our child or young person comes and says, I think I'm born in the wrong body. And by the way, we know for a fact that the people that we're talking to about that, they only come across that idea because they're shown it.
Right.
They don't wake up in the morning and think they're born in the wrong body. They go to school and they get questioned on it, and then it drops a seed of doubt into their head. And then they're confused. And then if they go home and say to mum or dad, I think I'm meant to be a girl, you're not allowed to say, oh, that's a silly thought.
You're not allowed to say, hey,
Maybe tomorrow
come
you
on.
won't think like that.
Come on, Johnny, slow your roll, get a good night's sleep.
That's
You've got years ahead of you before you have to do anything. Oh, no, that's bad. You can't do that. That's conversion therapy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah, so we'll do more on that another day, but that's basically the summary of conversion therapy. So it's important to remember that Matt Ducey's still in there as a Minister of Mental Health, and he was really pushing for this stuff to come in, which means that really if you were going to be balanced about mental health, you'd give the child a chance to stay in the correct body without mutilating it. That would be probably the fairest. And I really want to say, again, that to tell a child that they're born in the wrong body and then push them down that pathway of affirming that is conversion therapy. So I just want to talk about the mental health thing and the use of the words, because it's a huge industry right now. They're putting more and more money into this so-called mental health crisis of our children, and I'd always talk about not going further up the river. So what I actually want to do now is flick to when we did our roadshow in 2024, Elizabeth Cave came on tour with me. Now she's a wonderful lady, and while everyone was running around, including me, looking at what was in the sex ed guidelines, she was looking at what was in the health curriculum in school. So that was the well-being curriculum.
Nice one, Elizabeth. Shout out to Elizabeth
Shout
Cave.
out to Elizabeth Cave. So this is a flyer that we put together and we presented on it, and it was a massive aha moment for a lot of people. And when she said, when she did her talk, that she says, raising an alarm bell, beware of the word mental health, because it's not going to, if you're funding for a solution at the mental health, you're really at the bottom of the cliff, and you're not figuring out what's really happened, whether they've been ideologically adjusted or whether they have had trauma, right? It hasn't been a useful thing. So I'm just going to read this out. So this is from a psychologist from Psychology Today called Dr. Stephen Stosny, and he has a pyramid a diagram of what a healthy, secure identity is versus an identity of a child who's had their identity disrupted. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to walk through it for people that haven't seen it and haven't come along to our meetings before. So the foundation of identity is, let's have a look at the diagram. So what he says is that the foundation of identity are the bottom two parts of the pyramid. So that's your basic humanity and your character.
Right.
And then you've got other parts of your identity. All these components make up a healthy, secure identity. And you'll see that gender and sexuality and race and ethnicity are there because they're all part of our identity.
Yep.
But they're not the sole part of our identity. We can all agree on that. The people have different things that they like to do, and they might have different faiths and different personalities and things. But
right.
No one disagrees with this that I've come across, but
sure.
It's always the first time. So basic humanity at the foundation is a sense of connection with all humans. It increases respect, appreciation, compassion and kindness. Identifying with basic humanity alleviates the feelings of isolation that are integral to most psychological distress. It humanizes perceptions of others and culls the negative judgments of self and others that produce so much anxiety and resentment. When in touch with basic humanity, we like ourselves better and treat others humanely. And by the way, these are the words of Dr. Stephen Stosny, psychologist.
Right.
And character, which is also part of the foundation, consists of mental and moral qualities. For example, honesty, flexibility, humility, resilience, generosity, accountability, in addition to personality and temperament. In short, it's how we tend to think, feel, and behave. And when we talk about this at Let Kids Be Kids, people can identify with what is being said here. Mm-hmm. And it feels like balm to my soul when I hear words like that. And wouldn't it be amazing if our society and our education system focused on those basic humanity parts?
Yeah.
You know,
look at them. They're all so solid and grounded.
And kind of what like older generations would be, relatively familiar with. you know,
Sure.
service to others, looking after one another and having good moral qualities,
Yeah,
mental tenacity.
all good stuff.
So I'm going to turn the page now, and this is where it's the other side of it. So then we go, well, what's going on with our young people when they are in distress and they are coming under the mental health services?
Mhm.
Is one of the things that it may be, and it's only one thing because obviously there's trauma and other things like that, but is that their identities have been disrupted. So if we take that solid triangle pyramid and we look at the upper rungs of identity, which are gender, sexuality, and race ethnicity, identifying with any of the upper rungs of the pyramid at the expense of the foundation causes prolonged stress or dysphoria.
Ooh,
Starting to
interesting.
sound like our mental health crisis in our young
Yeah,
people.
yeah. But dysphoria, when you're really not sure what you are.
Yes, gender dysphoria is one of them. Yeah, where your identity is destabilized. Most of the ideological and cultural strife in the world, not to mention hate, stems from a hyper-focus on one or more of the upper rungs while violating the foundation. So when I first saw this, it helped me to understand what happened to people close to me. And as we went around the country, this had a massive aha light with parents, because what they're seeing is these lovely young beings, their children, who might have great moral qualities, were starting to really hone in and hyper-focus on their gender as the sole basis of their identity. That's what's happening to young people today. And if it's not their gender or their sexuality, it's their race, it's their ethnicity, it's their political affiliation, it's what are you going to be an activist about? What's the thing you're going to be an activist about? And it's like, where's my kid that loved playing sport or doing art and loved cooking with me, and we went on walks and swims and liked hanging out and respected his grandparents? Where'd that kid go?
Where's the happy human gone?
Where is the happy human gone who's kind of future forward thinking and positive about the future? So then Elizabeth created this diagram which compares a stable identity that has that foundation and all the components of an identity with an unstable identity. So that's what Dr. Stephen Stosny says there, is that if you take away the foundation and you're hyper-focusing on something that's only a small part of the identity. Okay, so if I just zoom in there to make it easier to see. So yeah, stable identity versus unstable. So there you've got gender as the tiny little fulcrum really that it's on.
Yeah.
And so really what we talk about is that the child has gone from being happy, confident and well-rounded and engaged to being distressed and self-focused, and they do need affirmation, because they need affirmation to stay upright. They need everyone to be talking about their gender all the time. So doesn't that sound like what's going on out in the world?
Yeah, we see that
right?
a lot, don't we? We see a lot of the whole, it's almost like we're creating narcissists. People have to be focused on and look at me and how I feel, and you've offended me. I feel offended, so you've got to change what you do and all that shit.
Yeah, and I look at it and I think, wow, remember the day when young people would just go out and do stuff? And now they're like thinking about the next, being on puberty blockers or they're cutting themselves, or what is going on here in this world?
The creation of narcissists.
The creation of narcissists. And then, but also when you tie that into the conversion practices bill, when that is happening, woe betide you say, hey, maybe you're making a call that you could regret later in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So legislation has stopped us from doing that. So they have created a huge industry out of this, out of having young people that have got their unstable identities for one reason or another. And now the solution is the never-ending services available in mental health, such as surveying children, counselling them, taking them off to gender clinics, getting the doctor to talk to them without the parents in the room, because they've already got an unstable identity. Okay? Right, I'm going to go back to the money side of it, because now that we've established, my view on what I think is going on with our children, let's see how they did this. What Grant Robertson and Jacinda Ardern did was they founded something called the Rainbow Wellbeing Legacy Fund, which we've talked about. So there it is there, and you'll see the logo up here, which is the Rule Foundation. The Rainbow Wellbeing Legacy Fund was founded in 2019 through the $1 million endowment that we talked about from the New Zealand government in recognition of men that were blah, blah, blah. The original idea for the fund was put forward by the men whose convictions. So that's a repeat of what was in that parliamentary Beehive document. after the fund was announced, it was agreed that it would be held and administered by the Rule Foundation. Okay, so it's gone out of the government coffers and into something called the Rule Foundation. After the fund was announced, it would be agreed that it would be held and administered by the Rule Foundation, given the alignment with their kaupapa. And then in 2021, a further endowment of $800,000.
Whoa!
So now there's $1,800,000 that the government, taxpayer money, has given into this Rule Foundation to manage this wellbeing fund for Rainbow Community. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 2022, Foundation North, which is another organisation to the Rule Foundation, they also gave money. They say it's $99,000, but when you actually go here, it's actually $99,999. Don't know why they didn't just round it up to $100,000. So in 2022, they did another round of funding and they got another $100,000. So I'm just going to scroll to the purpose. So the purpose of this fund is really important. So the intention of the fund is to support projects, activities and organisations to improve the mental health, there we go again, outcomes for future generations of rainbow communities. Oh, so future generations. So maybe they didn't exist yet. They have to create them.
Oh.
Maybe.
Yeah, they got to create them.
They're not saying that there's a massive need now, because they would have said that.
They're in the process of doing that anyway.
They're creating, create the problem, create the solution.
Yeah.
Okay, then keep funding it because you've created a problem and it needs to keep feeding the beast. That's what I'm saying here. So it says there again, particularly for young people. So it's not for adults. It's got nothing to do with those adults that were exonerated. It's got to do with the young people that they're creating into this thing called a rainbow community that wasn't really a rainbow community before. It is the hope of those who initially put forward the idea for the fund that their suffering as a result of their convictions would be turned into a positive outcome for others within the rainbow community. But they're not saying that there was a need. They're just saying they're throwing money into something. Interesting, isn't it? So why so much money for young people, given the initial intent of the legislation? That's a really important question. And why, when the legislation was for people over 16, are they doing this for youth? Because when they're doing it for youth, they're putting programs into school. And they're putting programs into school from 5 years old all the way up to when they leave, it's 17. So the majority of the youth that they're reaching wouldn't be people over 16, not when they're going and dealing with schools.
Right, good point. Right.
So they've shifted it.
Yeah, they've really shifted it.
They've shifted it from homosexuals
those of legal age through
to anything in the rainbow, and they've shifted it from adults into youth. That's the big thing that I want people to get their head around. So my question then is, why is there so much funding for young people that is under the legal age for sex? Would it not be more prudent in a moralistic and Judeo-Christian society, which is what New Zealand is, like it or not, that's what the basis of our society is.
Yeah, Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian society, which would have a moral compass around not over-sexualizing our underage children for sex.
Yeah.
Okay. Would it not be more prudent to encourage longer childhoods, innocence, freedom to be children, and be unhindered from the adult world of sexual preferences and pleasures? Am I speaking some common sense here, people?
I think so.
Introducing things that many people now under 16, especially before phones, it wasn't really happening as much before phones. So they might have known something that we didn't, or it might have just been a coincidence, but then there was the advent of phones and then all the things came through the back door. So now we have a problem on our hands. So then it says here, going back to the document, the fund will allocate grants with a view to improving, sustaining and or supporting mental health and wellbeing of the rainbow community. And this sentence is important. What is the money going to be used for? Grants will be targeted at activities that will improve the capacity and capability of communities. So again, not saying it's helping the poor young people, it's going to increase the capacity of the industry and capability of the industry.
Oh, the devil's in the detail.
You've got to look at the words. To support the rainbow mental health and wellbeing, such as resource development. Now remember that, because we're going to go and look at the resources that dropped out of the organisations that were funded. Resource development, community events, so promotional stuff, not really. They're not talking about counselling here at all. Resource development, community events, digital supports, information sharing, initiatives and campaigns. What does a campaign do?
It advertises.
It advertises and it changes
marketing.
social behaviour.
Mm.
It's not grabbing the kids that have the problem, it's creating the kids that will have the problem.
Yeah, and if you can create the problem, then you can have your solution ready to go for it.
If they keep funding it, yes.
Yeah.
And then research and training. So then there's this document, the Rainbow Wellbeing Legacy Fund 2024, and this has got a bit more information about the money. So let's just go through this. So in paragraph 1, the $1 million. Then there was $800,000. Then, let me just go down, 2024 grants round. The trustees will be distributing up to $400,000. I'm going to add all these up for us in the end. In the 2024 grants round, including multi-year grants, and this includes another $200,000 from Foundation North just for the benefit the people of Tamaki Makaurau and Te Tokara Northland. And then if I go back to the Rural Foundation website, then we've got the 99,999, let's call it 100,000 in 2022. But there's another one. So then we've got this Foundation North, and I found another 400, because I was going through the years, which I haven't done chronologically here because I'm just going to add it up because they're all over the place. But from 2021 to 2024, I was tracking the money and I was missing a year, and then I found it in a Foundation North. They got another $400,000 from the government there. There's another $200,000. There's a sum total in the last few years of $2,900,000, rounding up the $1.
Wow.
For the rainbow community, just from the government. So that's not talking about the Pride Pledge companies and all of that give the money. That's just from the government. Nearly $3 million of taxpayers' money. So people need to decide whether they're okay with that, and if they're not, what do we do as people? The media isn't talking about it, not the other guys. I'm talking about it. Who do we take it to? Do we take it to Winston Peters? Is anybody else listening? Given that we just saw that National wanted all this stuff in as well, who do you take it to?
And this is all just off the back of a bill for expunging criminal activity, which was fair enough, but it's gone too far.
Way too far. I mean, it's created such a massive industry. People have got lots of jobs over this. Who's going to talk about it? And who's going to shut up because they're going to be out of a job, right? There's also, this is only just the little bit of the money. This is just the breadcrumb trail that I can find. But in amongst these documents, it also says that you can apply to other organisations for smaller amounts. Well, being $5,000 to up to $100,000 a year. And then Foundation North is also a top-up partner for the Rural Foundation. And there's money just going everywhere. So I'm just going to move along to show you what, when I talked about the money went into resources, okay? Gender Minorities, which is a website that we talked about the other day. So they're one of the organisations that gets money from the Rural Foundation, which means that they're getting money from the government. So nobody actually picked it up and called me on it, which I was hoping that they would. So the other day when I did the Ben Doyle video, I raised the issue about gender minorities and their document that is really concerning. And I said these guys are funded by the government. No one actually said to me, prove it. But this is me proving it. So the Gender Minorities website, they have, if you go up to their information section, they have an area called activism. Now, Gender Minorities promotes itself as a safe place for the marginalised, stigmatised trans community. So that's quite different to activism. Activism is a political movement, right? Because you're wanting to fight and resist and do all of that stuff. So it's not just about caring for poor marginalised people, it's creating activists. So if I go to the activism page, now the other day we looked at this and I raised this document called Anti-Transgender Extremism, okay, which is highly concerning. And we're not going to go through it again today, but please, if you missed the other one, go watch it and please go and have a read of that document. There's another document here, which is almost as bad, if not worse, called Being Trans and Protesting. So we're going to have... It's so bad that you kind of almost have to laugh, but it's not funny because children are being really harmed by this. I don't know that anyone would want to look like that, frankly, but hey, I'm not hanging out with these people. So let's have a look. I just want to read out the first bit because the wording is quite confronting. Now, I'm showing you this because this is funded by that government money and other organisations, companies and other foundations and everything. For the transgender anarchists... Now, hang on a second. I thought that this was about a poor, marginalised, stigmatised group. But suddenly, they're anarchists.
And this is funded to have this by the government. So the government is funding transgender anarchists.
For the
Okay.
transgender anarchists and their other freedom fighters who dedicate their time and resources to social justice and community work, to the non-violent direct action activists and Indigenous rights, by the way, that comes up a lot, peace and anti-war, environmental justice, and prison abolition movements. Prison abolition.
Getting rid of prisons.
Sounds
That's-
like it. Now there's a very
Cool.
there's a Māori Te Pāti Māori, I think, backed group dealing with that, and it's Ropi Rakari's child, who's a university at Auckland University, who's got a whole organisation which is trying to abolish prisons. So you can see how it's all tied in. Anyway.
Okay.
And it says, you don't deserve the violence you are subjected to for standing up against corporate interests. And this was published back in 2018, which is really interesting. Right, so let's have a look. Many trans people are passionate about equality, fairness, and making the world a better place. Transgender students, so therefore they are talking about young people, are significantly more likely to be involved in activism than their cisgender peers. And this is especially so for disabled trans people. So now they've pulled in disabled people. They pulled in Indigenous before, so they're wrapping them all into these poor marginalised groups. So then it says they can lead them to join community groups, unions or protests. Some are held back by fear of discrimination. Anyway, I'm going to keep going down because gets a bit gnarly. What are my rights? Under the Human Rights Act and the New Zealand Bill of Rights, you have the legal right to your sex and gender being respected at all times, including by police, and including while protesting, being arrested or being held in custody. So these people want to be hardcore. This means police officers must use your correct pronouns and name, meaning that they've changed their name from a male name to a female. Once you have told them, you have the right to be searched only by an officer of your gender. If I was a woman police officer and a trans woman, which is a man, was stating that they wanted me to search them because they're a woman, you have to. They're forcing a woman police officer to frisk a male who's dressing up as a female. Are we okay with that? Is that where society's got to?
No.
If the person is being held because they've done something wrong, why should they get more rights than the very uncomfortable policewoman who might have to frisk that person? It's all backwards, isn't it?
Mm.
Will my rights be respected? The officers you encounter may not know about your rights. You can insist your rights. People need to go and have a look at this and remind themselves as they read through the horror of it that it was funded by you, whether you like it or not. So when it talks about will my rights be respected, then it says you can insist on your rights and ask that they bring a diversity liaison officer. So that's a work role. So somebody in the police has this role called diversity liaison officer. They've been trained to be sensitive to, and they even put it in inverted commas, diversity, and aware of human rights legislation. So this is where it gets concerning. So now I'm going to go and have a look at the New Zealand Police website and find out a little bit more about diversity liaison officers. So you can go to the police website, search up diversity, and you will find this page. Diversity liaison officers are located throughout New Zealand. Now, people are asking why we have rainbow police cars, why the police officers are at pride events celebrating and prancing around. Why aren't they out there catching real criminals? This might be why. So they have a whole section of the police force for one reason or another, and I would like to do an investigation into how this got to happen.
Yeah, I bet there's an interesting history there.
So people please need to go and have a look. And the reason that I'm showing you this is you can see how much they're filtering people out now to these third-party organisations. So these are the kinds of charities that get funded through things like the Royal Foundation and Foundation North. So it's going round and around. And people who are looking at this, you know, the Burnett Foundation, which used to be the AIDS Foundation, which Benjamin Doyle used to work for. So there we have it. Gender Minorities Aotearoa. So that's the organisation creating the resources that we just showed you.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole lot more inside out. That is the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective, so that's in there as well. So anyway, we're not going to go into a lot of detail there. I'm going to go down to resources and links. And you can see that there's a whole lot of resources to help this rainbow community, including a toolbox for rainbow children, remembering this is on the police website, And what I want to show a couple of things. I'm going to go to sex and relationships. Let's have a look. And you can see that from the police website, you can go and have a look at an online course, Transgender Guide to Sex and Relationships, from the police website.
Wow.
Who would have thought? They have a document called a link to what are pronouns. And this is concerning because I connect with people like me in Australia, and Minus 18 is a terrible organisation, and the New Zealand Police website is linking to them.
What do they do?
They're similar, I believe, to Inside Out here.
Okay.
Yeah. So very like pro-trans youth. Then they have Keeping Rainbow Communities Safe. Now, this is the police's own document on keeping the rainbow community safe. You see that? I don't know any other minority group in New Zealand that gets such a lot of attention. But this group certainly does, and the questions need to be asked as to why and how much money is. But here's the kicker. Anti-transgender extremism is on the police website. That is the document that we talked about the other day in the Benjamin Doyle situation. That's on the police website. So that's the document that says if you're questioning the trans movement, you're a fascist Nazi.
What?
And that's on the police website.
You're not allowed to question stuff now.
No.
Amazing.
It's dark, eh?
Yeah, it's really dark.
It's really dark. So
Ironically, it's actually fascist.
It is. It's Marxist, and it's taking away the parents' rights from the children because it's wrapped it now not only into education but into society and into mental health, into health, and the police. Couple of last things. I just want to bring up this guy, Duncan Matthews. So you can see here, he's working at the Rule Foundation. He's got links into the University of Auckland. Let's go and have a look at him. There's a reason why I'm showing you this. Proven director and manager with experience in non-for-profit, philanthropy, healthcare, community development, youth development, and rainbow LGBTI sectors. Now, so he's all about the LGBTI. You can see he's been doing it for a while, sleeping rough to end homelessness with LGBTI. I'm going to take you down to his experience. So he's currently the treasurer of the Rule Foundation. So he's the person who's seeing all the money coming in from the government.
He's the treasurer of the Rule Foundation.
He's the treasurer of the Rule Foundation that was getting that money from the fund from the government. It says here, we're tasked with preserving a $4 million capital base. There's so much money goes into this industry. That's why I don't call it a community, I call it an industry.
Yeah.
Let's see what else he's doing. So he's part of something called Community Think, which doesn't look to be overtly connected with the rainbow community from a quick look. Duncan Digital, so does NGO stuff. So this is a private public partnership. Oh, and look, he's also a funding assessor for Foundation North, that other organisation that we said were in cahoots with the Rule Foundation getting the government money. Oh, look, he was also a partnership fund board member of the Ministry of Youth Development that distributes $1 million a year for philanthropic things. He was also the treasurer of the Auckland Pride Festival for a couple of years. He was also involved with Outline, which is one of the organisations that we have on the list. He was also the Transgender Health Project Manager at the Waitemata District Health Board. So he was the Executive Director of Rainbow Youth, which is an ILGA organisation, by the way, for those who have seen our second USAID video. He was also on the Rainbow Communities Advisory Panel for Auckland Council. He was the account manager at gaynz.com. It's just one guy. So he's involved with the University of Auckland, Wānanga Aotearoa, so he's involved in tertiary education. Oh, local distribution committee member of community organisation grant scheme. So they also get money from the government and fund it into the rainbow community. Oh, and here's the kicker. He was the treasurer of PATHA. PATHA is the Professional Association for Transgender Health Aotearoa, who is the New Zealand arm of WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Healthcare, whose evidence is very poor, and they know that children can't consent to puberty blockers and gender change surgery, and yet they do it anyway.
That's a shocker.
He was also involved with the Graham Dingle Foundation, Outline, and Hamilton Pride.
Wow.
One guy. Why am I showing you this, apart from anything else? Here's the kicker. So this is a New Year's honours list for 2025. So that's for this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's lots of good people in there. I'm just going to look him up. One moment. Oh, what's he doing on here? Mr. Duncan Paul Matthews in 2025 received a Order of Merit for his services to the rainbow community. Look at that. I could be the best person in the world, but I'd never get that because I'm not part of that community. Hard to really know what to say, isn't it?
Yeah, it is hard.
This is not about a poor marginalised group of people, as much as Benjamin Doyle wants to pontificate about that from the Rainbow Room in Parliament with his lackeys behind him.
Mm.
And this is not a hit on him. I'm trying to show how big this is. I'm just going to move quickly, and we're at the end now, to just one final thing with taking it back to some personal stuff and going full circle here. There's a man, Calvin Morgan, and he somehow finally found me on X. I don't block these sorts of people. That I'm happy for them to see what I see. So a couple of days ago, this popped up and he tagged me in. So of course I saw it. A long-time cooker, bigot and fangirl of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., which in itself tells you all you need to know about the validity of her research and investigative reporting. Now, like me or hate me, the guy doesn't know me, and I just want to scroll up to what was originally the conversation that he decided to draw me into this conversation, and I had no idea what was going on. So Calvin Morgan was actually saying that his good old friend Paul Thistle, who runs Counter Hate Speech Aotearoa, who's very dark on anyone who's questioning gender ideology, has confirmed that they're unable to bring charges against Destiny Church. Now, Destiny Church and Brian Tamaki and I don't have much to do with each other, and I did write a Substack on that recently, so we're completely separate entities, never been part of Destiny Church or worked for Brian. So I don't know why I ended up on this thread, but there you go. So anyway, then someone called Real Politics NZ was in there trying to have a conversation, and they had a bit of a rant, and this LGBT ally, see, you have to be either them or an ally.
Oh, yeah.
They're having a bit of a rant. And so then they're talking about Brian Tamaki and off they go. And then they talk about Man Up and off they go. So anyway, somewhere along the line, this guy, Calvin Morgan, decided, yes, we'll draw Penny into this because she's saying stuff that we don't like. So I just want to say to people that have this happen to them, this was my response. Because sometimes you either don't respond or you get upset about it or whatever, but I just like having a bit of fun with them. So I just screenshotted it in case it went and said, I must be right over the target now. Some trans activist friend of Paul Thistle's just called me a mean name and linked me to Robert F. Kennedy. I'd rather be linked to Robert F. Kennedy than this guy if I were you. So you can have some fun with these people. Don't get worried about them. These people are trying to shut us down. They're not going to. They don't know our stories. They don't know who I am and what's happened in my life that's made me be a person on the front line. And they definitely don't know the kinds of conversations that I'm having with all of you wonderful adults out there and parents and grandparents who are heartbroken about what's going on with their children and can't understand. So just to take it full circle, just to finish off, I went and had a bit of a look at his page because he hasn't blocked me yet. And look at that, only a few weeks ago. Wonderful to see the reunion of our two most beloved New Zealanders today. To the haters, this is what no Fs to give looks like. And there we have the people that I started this conversation with, who initiated this $1 million fund, which has actually ended up being just shy of $3 million in a couple of years that they've loosed off the government and given to the rainbow community. So I'll just leave it here, but it makes me wonder whether perhaps Calvin Morgan and Paul Thistle were some of those, maybe they were part of his friend group that were exonerated and then thought that they would throw money into this.
Interesting thought.
Well, they're good friends, so I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a long conversation, but I hope people will follow those threads. I'll put the links below, and I'd love people to go and have a look. And I just want someone to come help us. I mean, the only thing that I can think of to help is to keep raising awareness, to keep joining dots together. I've had hundreds of people contact me just over the last week saying how grateful they are about the research that I'm doing. So I just want to do a shout out to anyone who's taken the time to thank me and encourage me, because it's dark, it's unfunded. So some help would be great, and we need to really build a team because there is no Doge here in New Zealand. There is no Department of Government expenditure that's looking at this misappropriation of funding, but it's bigger than a Doge. This is not just about funding. This is actually about the well-being of our young people and all of the funding that's going into things that are not actually helping them. And I don't know that the government or the ministries at the moment in the situation that we're in are in a situation where they can do anything about it. So it comes down to us at the grassroots, having the conversation, sharing the content, loving one another, getting alongside people when they're finding out that things are going on with their children, and really taking our authority back, because it's been we the people since ages ago. And we need to remember that it always has been and it always will be, unless we give our power away.
Nice one. And don't forget, folks, like and subscribe.
Please do.